Okay. So the aim of this conversation is, I guess, a bit of an initiative that we've been trialling in the Education Committee this year. The Education Committee and is, we don't want it to be this sort of procedural, box ticking exercise. We want to figure out how we can sort of action things, understand some of the issues a bit deeply. So every second month we have a special topics conversation, and this was floated earlier in the year as something around teaching craft. And in the conversations amongst the committee, what was pretty clear was that job readiness and teaching of technology in academia was a hot button issue, and so it's something I think that we need to see what's out there and think about, well, what can we do to sort of as individuals and as the institute help broker some improvements into that. Now, different people in this group immediately have had different things that we are trying to do things differently. So Teresa from Griffith University, for example, is starting a new course on documentation and technology, and reached out to us for advice. And Ryan from Fulton Trotter Architects has been also very heavily involved in PALS, and now sort of working through this MOS online. It's not online, but sort of graduate learning. And so there's a lot of things out there that I'm pretty sure some of even the academics aren't aware of, because it's all fairly new. So I think, if we get everyone in the order that I'll go through in a moment to speak sort of candidly and briefly, and we're trying to get a little bit of time at the end that we can then kick the can around a bit. And I do understand that people have to go a little bit, so I'm going to stop yabbering too much. Now, before I keep going, we do have to respectfully acknowledge First Nations people on the various countries that the lands that this meeting is taking place virtually. So we acknowledge Turrbal Yagara, Gubbi Gubbi, Jinnabara, and people of the Yungaba language region. And we pay our respects, but we also we need to keep finding ways in how to be more active in being part of the solution to reconciliation. Why isn't that going forward? There we go. So the question, well, why are we talking about it? Is there a problem that needs to be solved? Well, anecdotally, and students are feeling underprepared for practice. This has been a perennial problem. It's not, I think, a problem of now, but perhaps it's becoming a little bit more acute. But the confidence is, lower confidence sort of translates to, trying to overcompensate, and that opens up, feelings of inadequacy, overworking, stress, and all of the sort of things of young graduates entering the profession, overworking and poor work-life balance is, I think, in part tied up in this. Now, perhaps slightly controversially, there's been conversations that, it's not necessarily the opinion of the committee, but we recognise it is the opinion of quite a number of practitioners and officers out there, that the value proposition of new graduates needs to be challenged, because the argue of the cost benefit, according, the award demands certain wages to be paid, and some practices saying that the lack of preparation sort of makes it hard to realize the investment made sort of financially, and also it exposes practices to a considerable amount of risk as well. So underprepared graduates are also, it erodes, their perceived value both from outside and from within. But we do have to ask ourselves, how much needs to be taught in academia, because it's hard to do in what I call a companion course, because there's a lot of focus on design. and technology and other companion courses are sort of marginalised in the process. But, you know, the other thing that we can ask, there's 4 accredited programs in our region. So, you know, technology teaching is part of the accreditation standards. So if we're accredited, is there a problem? So that, and it comes back, and this is a point that Lee has made in the past, that, you know, who's responsible for preparing students in that sort of journey from graduate to registered architect? You know, there is, and it's embedded in the National Standard of Competency of Architects, that there's a significant amount of learning that is assumed in practice. But ultimately, the variability of that practice experience is a problem. And it sort of puts the onus on the student or the graduate or the candidate to be responsible. So it all falls back to the graduate at the end, and we need to support them in that way. So, you know, that's a sort of a really, you know, wide umbrella of some of the issues that we've been kicking around this year. But, you know, what works and what questions are sort of remaining. So we've got Tim to talk about his technology teaching in the UQ undergraduate program. I've slotted in Ryan and Teresa early because I know Ryan's got to leave early. Penny will talk about her course at QT, and I'm not super familiar with the course, but as I said before, Penny, your reputation precedes you. Paul Matthew, the sort of 4D learning environment, and I'm really looking forward to that because it is something special and different, and I'm pretty sure that Galna would be interested in that. And then Galna's going to follow up, and after that, we're going to have an open conversation. So if we can keep the conversations sort of nice and tight, if we don't get through the whole presentation, just go, okay, I'm done, and then we move on. And we're not going to solve all our problems today, but you know, let's make a start. So I'm going to stop my share and hand over to Tim, if that's okay.
Okay, I've got some really dull slides, so I'm not going to be very long.
Dull is good.
Yeah. So stop me if I go too long. I mean, I think there's a broader conversation here about how we structure our courses, and we're about to review our undergraduate program. But this is just a quick overview. We have no technology in the first semester, which I think is problematic. We have our first technology course in semester 2 of first year, which was traditionally very much about timber framing and used the old Trade Act code, and then the AS 1684. It's a little bit more about an introduction into materials with a timber focus. I'm back onto that this semester, so I'm looking forward to teaching that with an emphasis on timber framing and understanding that Australian standard. This is the one I've been asked to. This is the one I've been asked to talk about. First semester, second year, the second of the technology courses was really about an introduction to architectural science and sustainability. Used to be based on that Steve Zoccolai book. So a good basic introduction to sustainability. This is the one I'll talk about, where we go from, we had a bit of a pattern going where we were introduction to construction, more building performance, architectural science, and then back to construction, which was the more documentation, domestic construction. And then our fourth course at the beginning of first semester, sorry, that should say third year, was about building performance and on facades. Now Michael's taught that, I've taught that. And then the last course, the graduating course, was one that Chris Landorf looked after, which Paul Matthews teaching this semester. I'm going to talk about which was really sort of a one that integrated a whole lot of technology on a larger scale building, and the NCC. These are generally have been reasonably, I think, good courses. That they run over 12 weeks. Our 13th week, it's a 13-week semester, is design week, so we can't teach then. Some of us have tutored after that and have our assignments coming in later. I think one of the things to say about technology is we all talk about technology and then wanting to see it in design. Our courses ages ago got rid of folio and what was a 15-week semester for design, and have truncated that to 13 weeks. So students stop designing in week 11 and start presenting. So we get very little detailed design and development out of the design courses, which of course are our 4-unit, our major courses. So that's problematic, because the students aren't putting some of this technical know-how into their design. They just don't have the time. So one of the this course, before COVID, the first part of it, we were structured around a group assignment where we organised, I organised a whole series of site visits. I would take what I could get. So there was a range of scales from domestic, but often larger scale buildings. And I think this was fairly important. I still think it's important. We had to stop it during COVID. And it's problematic because at the moment we've still got this residual online component of students. So it makes it, there's a hard to have most of the cohort going to site and having a learning experience, and then some people who are just either looking at it through a phone or have to look at it through video. But I think a lot of the time this is a little bit beyond the students, but I think it's very good to get them on site. We try to get them a white card. We have to get them a white card and get them there. And they learn a lot. The important thing for me as an academic is I learn a lot. I go to lots of different things, and the builders in particular, and often and invariably the architects, are full of really interesting information and about changes, implications of the NCC and that sort of thing. That's something that I think the Institute could help with. It's a week's work to organise these in small groups and get students out there over probably 4 afternoons, sometimes 5. And found footings, slabs, walls, and as I say, it's focused around sort of enthusiastic people showing the construction makes a big difference. Our major project is a document.
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe if you turn your video off, because we're getting a little bit of lag.
Sure.
I don't know whether that's going to spoil the. It's not a deal breaker, but yeah.
No, let me.
Look, that's fine. Just keep going. We'll be fine. We'll live.
Are you still watching this now?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. All good.
Okay. There you go. Sorry, I just had to find that. So the major assignment, which was really around about sort of 60%, was the documentation of duplex assignment. And I think this has worked quite well over the years. We've sort of, Paul has tutored with me for several years on this assignment. And what we tend to do is, and I know there's different opinions about this, is some colleagues, and I know people who teach technology want to teach it through design. So they want it to become a design exercise, and then you learn through applying the technology design. My feeling is that with really only 12 weeks, and often it's only 11 weeks because of other course requirements, we don't have enough time to do too much design. So this course is giving the students we give them a choice. They get given a set of plans for a duplex, often taken from a townhouse, or and then they're given this without any scale, so they have to scale this up and put this on a site which is in Auchenflower, and all of these sites will accommodate the duplex, but they generally have about a 2.5 or sometimes 2 to 3 meter fall across the site, usually from one corner to the street. So they've got a site, the building. They spend a fair bit of time that often in first year, if they haven't done much design around on more difficult terrains, they really struggle with this. But it's about that understanding of how to sort of put a slab on ground. It's fairly, as I say, it's a fairly straightforward. It's then a set of drawings, and we work fairly intensively in tutorials with this. It's often it starts as group tutorials and then one-on-one, and so the students are getting sort of 15 minutes each, and then observing other students. So it's almost like a quasi design course, the way it runs in the end, because of the amount of tuition. I say not in terms of teaching design, but in terms of the intensity of tuition. And these are just some of the examples. They're just a very good example. They're doing a site plan. They learn about drawing, so teaching drawing technique. I should have said also in that communications, we only have one communications course in the program, which again is not enough. We've been talking about having 2 communications course in first year. It's about fitting it in. We don't, in the past, and Michael was excellent at this when he was working with us, was trying to run workshops for people, for students who are behind. Half of the students are able on CAD, sometimes up to 30% are struggling, and 10% really struggle. So we have run extra sort of curricular work, sort of workshops on CAD where we've had a drop-in session. That's problematic with COVID. We've got no one on campus at the moment using, and we've got rid of our computer lab because everyone's working from home or on their own laptop. So that's changed as well. Just some of the examples, again, quite a good example. And the sort of thing that they produce. This is a very good one, and we tell them that this is useful for their portfolio going into third year for their year out. I think that's about it. Okay. So if there's any questions about that.
Well, I think, and I do know that you have to go, Tim, and so in some senses, if there are any immediate questions, perhaps is a good time to interject now, but if there isn't, then we'll keep going. So
as a comment, having spoken about with Troy, so the idea that you put forward a fairly standardized design for them to document, I think is excellent, rather than having them try to document a design that they've come up with, because the designs they come up with generally are quite challenging and would require a team of people to develop them, whereas this is nicely scaled, it's domestic, has enough complexity, and I think that's sort of the approach that you would certainly encourage, is not to make the design too challenging, but to work through the detail and to be able to present in a industry standard fashion. I think is the right approach.
Oh yeah. And I think it works, and I think just that having the duplex and the party wall and introducing them to sort of not, as those of you would know, I mean, their knowledge base is so low when they start these courses. I mean, you're often trying to remind them what a rafter is. It's really there's a lot of sort of content that we have to get across as well, and it works very well. Like I've run this course when Andrew Wilson's been running a similar scale sort of mixed use project in suburbia. So he's using a sort of that they're doing in design at the same time. So they can actually sort of see the relevance of the, the construction and what they're learning in design. So that's quite useful, but that hasn't always been the case.
Look, thanks for that, Tim, and it'd be great if you could stay on the line as long as you can, but I know that you've got a family commitment. But so if we don't get a chance to thank you, and it was great to share. Now, in a changeover of the schedule, I've got Ryan and Teresa, which I presume you guys were presenting in tandem. Have I got that right or not?
No. Look, and I'm happy to give the time to Teresa, but the little outline that I created was largely prompted by Teresa having contacted me some weeks ago in preparation for her working on her new course, saying, what sort of advice would you give? And she had a lot of questions, what's the 5 most important things for this? And then I responded in a manner that suited me and then ignored all of her questions. So this is just my advice. Some of this is advice that we've generated within the practice for our own needs, for tutoring young staff around what we think is important. So I'm happy to share it. I don't need to take a lot of time with it. I think you can probably take it away and absorb it in your own time to the extent that it's useful for your courses. This is probably the point of view of an employer talking to our own young staff about what we think is important. But I think probably more pressingly, maybe Teresa would like to jump in and just talk about the course that you have prepared and the challenges that are part of that.
Ryan, I'm actually happy if you want to go do your bit first,
okay.
Because I know that you've got to go, and I'm happy to sit here and listen. I'm still recovering. I've had 2 different courses today, so I've been talking for 6 hours, and I'm still recovering.
All right, let me just pull it up, not to waste time. I'll just go through it. Can you see some slides? What do you see, guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your slides.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. So I'll just I'll give you the content and you can go away and read it. But I've got 12 dot points, and Teresa, I think, sort of quickly identified in her queries to us initially was, what is each of the packs of drawings that you produce have a very different audience, and I think that's actually quite a useful sort of mental construct to know that the packages of drawings you're preparing have quite different audiences, and so the style and format for the information you present is quite different. So sketch design is all about selling an idea, and that's kind of what the students do most of at uni, I imagine, which is about selling a big idea and then developing it and making it look attractive. And DA is obviously a procedural thing. DD being largely focused on developing the content in detail with your engineers. So the engineers being the audience, which I think is interesting. And then the working drawings being specifically geared around talking to a builder and using their language. And the fact that you create different packs of drawings and the information changes and the output changes as you go through that process because you're talking to a different audience. A big believer in the idea of working things out by hand. And if I provide advice to young people, it's draw by hand if you can, even if you're then going to convert to computer later, because I think there is a really strong link between the way that the brain works when you draw by hand and work things out. And that there is a lot of, even just the act of setting things out, with a grid and is important to sort of do by hand, or even if you're not doing by hand, at least as a 2D drawing on the computer. So I do a lot of hand drawing, and I encourage my young team to do the same. So some examples of that. The idea that your drawings are all about clarity. So I'm sure you guys are teaching some elements of good drafting, and so I do accentuate drafting as an important exercise and something that is not beneath architects. Drafting is really important. So the old-fashioned stuff around the hierarchy of line weights, which still translates across into CAD, use of fills and it being readable and sort of have a clarity and a calmness about the drawing, the way that it can read, and that you don't have to show everything. And I think CAD often gives you too much information, so you have to curate the information that's on the drawings. The idea that the industry, you don't just make it up. There's a graphic language that's used by the industry generally, particularly in the context of working drawings for the builder, and the way that we represent sections and grids and all the rest of it, it doesn't come from nowhere. We've actually been using a very similar graphic language this is a drawing from 1930, of a little house. And the style and format is actually very similar to what we do today, but the stuff we use today comes from the Australian Standard, which first came out in 1978. So the way that we talk about information being represented on drawings has been very, very stable over a long time. And you just have to learn it and love it. The importance of a drawing list, so you can work your way through it. And just a little historical tidbit that, so in the old days, an A1 drawing took about a week to do, so, which kind of still works today. And they actually design the package of drawings, figure out which drawings you're going to do at what scale before you start. So I think it's important. The idea that each drawing in the package has a very specific purpose. They don't just get spat out of CAD, that you actually design the drawing for a particular purpose. And as an example of that, here is a slab plan, which shows the footings under the slab. It shows the set out for all the slab elements, and that's particularly useful for the concrete trades who are setting out the slab first. So there's a drawing that's specifically for them, and that the builder is using that for a trade package. And conceptually, the idea that builders set out from a plan and then they build from detail. So the two have a relationship, quite different purposes. And that you don't just sort of hack away at the drawings, that you actually tackle, consider the 5 most important details that you really want the builder to get right, and draw them first and draw them exhaustively. I think CAD just gives you sort of too much crap, and you have to really, really, be focused about what you want this drawing to do, what is it for, and who's going to use it. Which sort of has, you have to understand what the builder's doing with them. BIM is about making decisions and then modeling, not the other way around, because I get a lot of time spent modeling, but there are no decisions in the model, which is pretty frustrating. What is that wall made of? I don't know, but it's fully modeled and rendered and, has come out of Enscape or something. So that's a 3D visualization is a completely different process from BIM. BIM is about making decisions and building the building in 3 dimensions. Some reference to the BIM standards, level of detail from 100 through to 400. This is sort of bit of a changing world, but that's 400 is about as far as we go. So we do detail up to level of detail 400. So that has a specific meaning. And some words of advice about how to sort of go through the process of making decisions and then modeling. The idea that buildings are built up in layers, and those layers are site, structure, envelope, services, fit out, and then also the specs and the approvals as sort of separate layers of thinking. And you can actually break up the project in that way and divvy up the work between people. And if you're working alone, it's still helpful to sort of work your way through that as a process. And it's and on very big projects, in fact, you have different teams working on those different components. They connect together, which is why BIM is very good, but nonetheless, you can kind of work away at each of those in isolation. And this is really what our MOS course is all about. If you don't understand how a building goes together, then it's very hard to document them. So you've got to learn your standard details, and then you have to spend time detailing the special things. And you can't do a whole building out of special details. You have to use standard systems, standard methodologies, otherwise the builder can't comprehend the building. And then there may be 1 or 2 sort of quite special elements which you'd then sort of put more energy into. And in the background of that is that the idea that having good details reinforces the builder's confidence in your documents overall. You can see that you understand how the things go together. Documentation is coordination. This is sort of, now that we're in a world of BIM and celebrity clash detection, there's a lot more pressure placed on architects to sort of get this all perfect and right. But for the benefit of students, the idea that the architectural drawing are the place where everything comes together is pretty important, and that your job is coordination. Using a checklist, we love a checklist here, got lots of them as a discipline, and then getting that information to go across into the specs is pretty important too. You can see in this little table, we actually nominate not just the kind of information to be checked off, but when it goes in. So the grey tones indicate that we don't talk about that during concept design, but does get picked up later in the process. So there's a procedure to it as well. And then just some thoughts, a bit of motherhood about being considerate of the people who who rely on your drawings, particularly the consultants, because they can only do their work if you've kind of locked down the plan, and they'll always be a couple of weeks behind you, which people often forget. And programming, allowing time for estimates and approvals and other things, and particularly for coordination, which we struggle with. And then to finish off, I guess this is what I thought would be useful to communicate to young people, is that even at uni, drafting and interpretation will be a big part of your job. And that's kind of the reality of it. And that construction relies on a lot of standard details. A big chunk of it is standard details, standard systems. So you kind of got to know all those things, and that you'll spend a lot of time, a big part of your career, developing, that extra 10% of magic, which is the non-standard, and sort of 10% of design and other things that you do in your career. But a lot of it is documentation. So it's important, yeah. And I don't think it's a trivial issue. I certainly take a lot of pride in the quality of drafting that we produce, and I think it's important that architects take it on board. It's not for others, it's not for draftees, it's not something that lower order people do. It's a fundamental part of what architecture is. Okay, I'll stop now.
Thanks, Ryan. Teresa, did you want to add anything while we've kind of got the audience there around around Ryan's presentation?
Not specifically. I mean, I found Ryan's presentation really good because it made me feel better about what I was talking to the students about today. It's like, yes, I'm checking off that one. I think, why I initially reached out to Ryan and a couple other practices here on the coast is just from our perspective, from a perspective at university, is what are their expectations, given we have got such limited time to teach these things, if what is it that we really should be focusing on. And I think sort of that was really good to get that from Ryan in terms of just providing some clarity and focus for me in terms of my approach to the course. So Michael, do you want me to talk about how I've set the course up, or?
We might just hold that for 1 second. And although I knew that we were going to talk all at the end, I think this sort of more fluid approach is working well. But I'd be keen to sort of see what Tim and Penny might have to say in response to Ryan's presentation.
I can say that it's excellent. I'm big on the checklists. Brian Mann from the council sent me a checklist, which I found in one of his emails. He used to send me lots of emails with lots of information, and it actually turned out to be very, very useful, that the Brisbane City Council uses for their documentation. I mean, I think I very much support what Ryan says about the hand drawing, but it's very difficult often to get students to hand draw, particularly once they move beyond the first year. I mean, I did an exercise where I tried to get them to go out and document just sort of stairs and handrails and draw it on either graph paper or paper. So many of them balked at it and wanted to do it on CAD, even in sort of second year. They were not prepared to draw. So that was a problem. And interesting, good advice about BIM. I mean, we're agnostic about software. I know some universities I've seen recently sort of insist on learning Revit at a certain stage. But we know from design that, Revit kills design. They start getting into it in second and third year, and their designs go backwards because it's just, they end up, I mean, they just can't represent what they're trying to do in Revit. So that's a problem too. So, choosing those systems is problematic because it relies on the students really immersing themselves and are doing a lot of self teaching.
I've got a point to make, but I'd like to invite Penny if you wanted to make any comment.
Well, I was going to basically mirror what Therese was saying, in that it was good to read through your presentation today, Ryan, because I sort of went, yep, do that. Thank goodness. And I agree. I wrote down a few of them. So starting by hand, we always start by hand with the students. But on top of that, we also get them to mark up their drawings as well. So they might be working in whatever program they're working on, but we encourage them to print out and then do the next stage as drawings over the top of that as well. And we use markups, and I'll show you an example in a minute as well, to give feedback to students over their projects. So it's also getting them used to that practice. It's really, really important. And the focus on clarity and that it's a communication, that's what we do as well. It's it was really good to get that presentation.
Can I make 2 comments? And I know I'm being cheeky by interrupting the flow. What's people's opinion about checklists aligning with assessment criteria? Because I think because assessment drives behavior, and if there's a clear alignment between the two, then the students will pay attention. The second thing is in a point that you make, Ryan, about curating the information because of the abundance of layered guff in the drawings. You know, we can say to students, oh, you need to show less and curate it, but we don't tell them how. So there's opportunity and probably some limitations in our own expertise about saying, you know, you need to sort of reduce the sort of visual clutter in this, and this is how you do it. That conversation about this is how you do it, because the student goes away and goes, how the fuck am I going to do that? I've got no clue how to drive this software in a certain way. And the same with using, you know, there seems to be a universality in the way that packages work and the way that you sort of structure either drawings as a, you know, nesting or layering and so on. That would be a great sort of vehicle to then build up a design in the different sort of layers, you know, the slab, the frame, the cladding, and so on. So you sort of teach the protocol of the application and the drawing convention at the same time you teach the actual sequence of construction.
So I think there's a disconnect, well, a connection that has to be made between the drawings and a building, and the building is being made by a construction team, and that they you know, you might design from the roof down, but they build from the footings up, you know, and you have to understand how the building goes together in parts in an order, and the order is driven by how the building is built. So you know, I think it's interesting and fun to sort of think about drawings and space and architecture as a set of envelopes, but at some point it has to turn into a building, and there has to be some real robustness to, well, how do we actually build buildings, and how do the drawings reflect the way the buildings are put together, and the set of tools that the builder needs to understand so that he can get what you're trying to do. Yeah.
But I think that's part of the beauty of Tim's method of giving them the design to start with.
Yeah, I think that's fine. That's good.
But I just say, you comment about checklists, Michael, I've been sort of hesitant to give checklists. I think it's important for them to sort of give them examples of drawings, good examples from architects. I mean, there's some fine documentation we had, which I gathered from the site visits, to get them to study and look and learn, because I remember that's the way I learned. A lot of us learned by looking at other people's drawings and how they represent things. And I think there's value in learning from looking at those sources. The checklists I don't think are that important in terms of the criteria. I mean, what's important is that you can work out whether they understand what they're doing, which goes back to what Ryan's saying. We want to teach them how buildings go together, so they start understanding that and bring that into design. You can get a lovely set of lovely documentation set, but then you look at it and you realize they don't really have a clue what they're drawing, because they're just copying things. And you can see that in some of the sort of sections and details. So that's the challenge.
Unfortunately, CAD and BIM doesn't include a gravity tool, which is that, you know, press a button and everything would fall down because it's not actually standing up very well. Or it doesn't include a waterproofing tool, which is that if water hit it, where would the water go? Those are, I think, two innovations that I think should be introduced into our, you know, ArchiCAD and Revit world.
So Teresa, did you want to add anything before we moved on?
No, I mean, specific to what we're doing at Griffith, or just in general?
Just
In
general.
general.
If there's a burning thing in the top of your mind, and
No,
just
I think I sort of agree with most of what's been said. I mean, I've set this course up similar to Tim's, where the students are working off a base design project. There was a bit of contention from others about the architectural merit of the base design project. They didn't want students to just be doing a standard project home or some simple duplex. They thought the base project needed to be of architectural merit. So we're actually using it Ann Street, but I think that's a good approach. And I always struggle with students with CAD. Again, in our documentation course, we've got students using all different sorts of software. So how do we manage that with between tutors, having tutors that are over the different types of software, but also just getting them to do things by hand. They're really reluctant to do it, but I'm hoping, because they've just done a construction subject, which I think Lee tutored into, and I know Henry got them to do a lot of hand drawing in there. And I think getting them to share their work is another thing. Like, for them to be able to learn, they need to get feedback on what they're doing. And if they're reluctant to share their work, if they're not coming with work printed out to get feedback on it, then they're not improving necessarily. And by the time they submit their assessment, it's too late. So it's trying to get them over that. And I think the COVID online teaching hasn't helped with that, because it's sort of this whole studio environment and collaborative approach has really sort of broken down a bit. Yeah.
Look, thanks for that. Penny, I'm just sort of wondering whether we can pass over to you. And we're all sort of following the similar thematic, so hopefully we'll be able to understand the magic.
I don't know if there's any magic.
I'm just trying to lay the red carpet out. I should stop.
So I've got a presentation that I put together for something else. So, but it's got the 3 units that I focus on. I'll share my screen. Are you able to see that?
Yep.
So I'll come clean. I'm interior design background. But I've been teaching for the last 3 years, our first year common unit, which has got architecture, landscape and interior students in it. And again, it's coming back to Ryan, that idea of presenting to different types of groups, and that your communication needs to change for each of those groups. This unit is about that. So we start with a schematic design for a client. So we talk about what clients need and the types of visualizations that you'd be doing for them. And then it moves into construction documentation. So we give...
Can you change that to full screen mode?
We can, yes. We have the technology. Is that all right?
Oh, nice.
Okay, so largely we just have content that we cover, and then I basically have this massive list of different types of drawing types, and I highlight the ones that we're going to be covering in each unit, and by the end of the 3 units we've covered all of the drawing types. So we don't try and do all of the drawing types in every unit, so it means that we can really focus in on certain things. So in the first year we're really just focusing on plans, elevations and sections, just the basics. They get a site which has a tiny little kiosk in it, and we tell them that it's heritage listed, so they can't do anything to it. What they have to do is do an addition to it. That's just unit coordinator talk, but don't touch the building. So they have to come up with an outside seating area. We're very prescriptive for the things that they have to actually add to the site. Bins, pathways, shower spaces near the coast. And really, it doesn't matter what they draw. It's about having something to draw that they've had a little bit of control over producing, so that everyone's producing something slightly different, because that helps in terms of, cheating and all that sort of stuff. And so then that gives us a basis that we can start to talk about the basics of drafting, which are, those things mentioned there. So we explicitly we teach all of those things explicitly. So we teach cross-referencing. What is it? What does it look like? How do you use it? Here's a little exercise we're going to do. Cut up this paper, put them in order that drawings would go in, fill in the drawing titles, fill in the title block. So they have to actually do that as an exercise, because I think often we show students examples, but we don't actually talk them through it. So we and this is first year. So, we do drawing line types, line weights, that we use different types of lines to communicate different things. I mean, you guys know all that sort of stuff. Then we move into second year where we, so this is just the interior students now, but I do get some architecture students who do my units as well. And we're focusing on compliance with 1428.1 specifically. So I introduced them to the broader kind of world of the National Construction Code and Australian standards and the QDC. But then we just really focus in on parts, because I figure if they can master one part, then they'll know how to master the other, or at least they'll know where to go and find and access that information. So we use that standard and they're assessed on their ability to apply that standard. Again, they're actually in that one, I just give them a building I made up, because then it's not very complicated. It's very simple, and I can very conveniently put things where I want them to be, like hydraulic risers, so that they're kind of learning the concept of thinking about, when you put in toilets, you've got to think about where the waste is going, and those sorts of things. I mean, Jacob was such an awesome student that he was going to do well no matter what he did. So I'm not exactly sure what it is that Jacob saw in the units or what he got out of them, but as we got our student feedback today, and I think probably one of the winners in these units are the resources that we produce for the students. So this is a document that I did. I mean, I've been teaching these units for 12 years now. So over the years, we've got a lot of student feedback. So we've learned a lot. And so I've developed, these are basically my lectures, which over the years have developed, and they get updated each year because things change in the industry. But it's a drafting conventions one. It's a whole section on cross-referencing, a whole section on dimensioning. And it's very explicit.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a good one. It's taken a while to put together. But then the other thing is also just making sure that they're getting reliable information as well. So they'll often Google for products, and it's just a disaster. And we get Spanish, suppliers and stuff like that. So one of my jobs when I was working at Woods Bagot was I was in control of the supplier list. So I used that and I created this directory. So it's broken into packages, and there's direct links to the websites. So at least I know that they're going to good people to get good information to do their research on all of that sort of stuff. And then also I do my own demonstration videos. So in the first year unit, we do Revit and AutoCAD. That's the other disciplines. So architecture and interior want them to learn Revit. Landscape want their students to learn AutoCAD. So I put these little videos together. They're anywhere from 5 minutes long to probably the longest is 30, but there's not very many of them. And they're broken down by tools. They take no effort to make. They're so quick. And it basically steps them through their project without actually doing it for them. So with the kiosk, I show them how I built the kiosk. So they learn the wall tool, the floor tool, the roof tool, and then they have to apply that to their addition that they're adding onto the building. So they have to use the floor tool, the wall tool, and the roof tool to be able to do that, and so on and so forth. That's a lot of work, just saying. So this is some of the work that they produce. That's their sites, that's their little kiosk, and the additions that they put onto it. And we talk about layouts of drawings. I mean, that's a crazy amount of notes on a drawing, but we also talk about very explicitly how to put a good note together: size, material, item. And if it's a detailed drawing, it's size, material, item, fixed to what and how. And it's just the thing that kind of flows off the tongue, and they learn that. So they start to learn that language of construction. So second year is another set of demo videos. So that carries on. This is the interior students going into the second year. So they get the next set of drawings, which is stepping them through a much more complex project. And because I teach all three of those units, I know what they've learned in the earlier ones. So I know I'm not repeating stuff, and I know by the end of it that they've got it all. So this was for this one, they get a cafe, and they had the premise is they're part of a larger team, and they've been given the job of doing the public toilet area. So male, female, and a PWD facility. And then in the second project, they have to design the staircase and make it comply to 1428.1 and obviously National Construction Code.
Nice.
So that one's a fun one. Talking urinals with a bunch of girls is very, very funny. So that's the stairs. We actually don't do this project anymore. Mainly because interiors don't really do much in the way of designing staircases. It was really, they just needed to understand it as a spatial exercise or planning exercise, that they actually allow enough room for a staircase. So we've squished this project and the bathrooms together to be just one compliance project. So they don't have to go into the construction detailing of the stairs like we have in the past. So that's actually been better. And then we do joinery documentation instead. The last unit is services integration. So it's getting our friends at Interior Engineering, Russell, to come in and talk to the students about services coordinations, where the students learn very explicitly about reflected ceiling plans. And we take them through some of those systems, even though they'll never do it. Just sort of understanding how they work means that they can have an informed discussion with the engineer when they need to say, no, you can't put that there. These are just whiteboard demo. I've got the whiteboard, I don't know, it was an app I found on my computer. So I talk while I'm drawing. And so I can talk them through processes. And it's a really easy, simple thing to do. And so we get a lot more guest talks in this one, because by this time they're sick of me listening to me talk. Showroom visits as well. I think I would love to get these students on site. What we're actually implementing this semester, I'm trying to be really quick, is Matterports. So we've started taking Matterport models of construction sites. So this semester we're going to get them with goggles on. And so we're going to get the class walking around this construction site with their goggles on in a virtual environment to kind of walk through a construction site. And eventually we're going to start to embed like talks. We're going to record. So we've got Russell from Interior Engineering is going to record some snippets for us, and we're going to embed them into the video. So as students are walking around the space with their goggles on, they can click on the information and Russell will pop up and talk in their ear, telling them what that HVAC system is doing and those sorts of things. More demo video now.
Sorry to interrupt, Penny. Just to say goodbye, guys. I got to duck off and teach now, but thank you, and sorry to interrupt. Cheers.
That's fine. I think I'm done. That's some of the drawings they were producing. And yeah, so I think, we're getting pretty complex drawings out of them. With this one, I give them the building, and I also make it a very small fit out, because I've learned that if it's bigger, we get lots of breadth but not depth. So I've actually learned kind of over the time that if you keep the project quite small, you get better depth from the students, and they're able to spend more time researching and understanding things rather than just trying to get it all done. I think that's it.
Thanks for that, Penny. The VR stuff that you talk about, is that a reasonably new thing, or have you started using that in your course?
How did we get it started? QUT started taking, they've been using the Matterport cameras to capture a lot of our teaching spaces during COVID. So students can go and do a virtual tour of the fashion studios or the workshop. And so we've got a group that we approached, and we got some money to develop it as well, because we thought it'd be a great way if you can just go and capture a space. So basically, I don't know if you're familiar with Matterport, but it's basically a three-dimensional 3D camera, but you put it sort of throughout the space. You have certain spots, and it films in 3 dimensions, and then it stitches them together. And it creates a virtual space that you can walk through. And we thought, wouldn't that be awesome for a construction site? And we've got so much construction going on at site, on campus at the moment, that it's been really easy to get access to those spaces. And we've got someone who is very good with the Matterport camera, and he comes along, and it takes about an hour to do some spaces. And we haven't put it in front of students yet, so that's my plan this semester, is to get them in goggles walking through a construction site, because I just think when I was a student, I learnt the most, I think, when I was on site. So I think it's really, really important.
Cool. So that's a work in progress, and maybe something for our conversation next year. It's almost finishing on that aspect, and then leading into the conversation that Paul is going to lead about the 4D learning environment. There's interesting sort of crossover. I'm not sure whether the 4D learning environment is a virtual thing or just a screen-based thing, but I'll let Paul talk us through that.
Sure. Okay, I'll just take control of the screen for a sec. Okay, so the quick answer to your question, Michael, is that the 4D learning environment is really just a screen-based thing. It sounds very similar to what you're doing, like an earlier lower tech version of the Matterport. So this is the most recent building that Chris organised the capture of in this 4D learning environment. The Andrew and Liveris building out at UQ's just won a swag of awards. And so it's quite good to be able to sort of step through the construction of this building. It's also quite good for our students because they can actually go and visit it quite easily and sort of see the end result, and then step back through time in this to sort of see what was happening in order to achieve a particular result. So it's sort of split into 2 areas. The first part is this panoramic photos of given points throughout construction. On the right here, you can see all the dates that which there's camera surveys were done. And down here, we've sort of got locations, and you can sort of, oops, that's a bit slow, but you can sort of spin around. So we're in that northeast corner, and you can sort of see here, this is at the point where they've started stripping out the formwork. There's still sort of prefab forms in place. And as we skip forwards, we can sort of start seeing, okay, here, not much has changed, but now the forms are fully stripped. There's still sort of caging on the outside. We can sort of go through the process of the installation, or the preparation for the glass facade going on, installation of sprinklers and services, the facade going on, and sort of infill spandrel panels down below. And then a greater fit out of services. And eventually you sort of step through to, internal walls, and eventually to the fully complete building, or very close to it. I think it looks like it does actually get through to ready to inhabit. There is a small issue where sometimes the cameras move from survey to survey. But essentially, it's a good way to sort of track the stages of construction and to sort of understand in a bit more detail the processes that go on in order to achieve a finished result. And so the other part of this, the 4D learning environment, is there's a link to a huge set of drawings, an overwhelming set of drawings for undergraduate students. So there's kind of full, let's see, there's a set of drawings of the revised facade that was part of the value management process for the building, as well as a few things of early works contracts and programs. But under the main works for the tender, you can sort of see it's everything from the invitation to tender, conditions of tender, bills of quantities, drawing specifications, and so on. So this sort of works from third year into master's students. You can use this as a professional practice subject teaching tool, looking at setting up general and special conditions of contract and a tender, that kind of thing. And then when you sort of get into the drawings, there's a full set of not only architectural, but vertical transport, security, electrical, civil, fire, everything. So you can get in and really see the full extent of work that goes into a large, complicated lab building. And so these drawings are available as both DWGs and PDFs. And so you can sort of see here, it's a sort of a split 2D, 3D sort of documentation system that Lions and M3 have used. And the way this is integrated into the third year technology subject that I'll be running in this coming semester is, oops, I'll just have to stop share and then share a different element. Yeah. So in this subject, students sort of do a case study. One of the assignments is a case study detail where they isolate a particular detail from the documentation package and then use that 4D learning environment to sort of to find that location, to redraw the basic ideas of the detail, and then to sort of reconstruct and put them together themselves in 3 dimensions, as well as do some exploded axonometrics that explain the sequence of construction that gets you towards that endpoint. And having gone through the exercise with a clear example that you can sort of see and follow, they then do a detail of their own on a sort of a group larger scale documentation project. So in this case, the students isolated this sort of internal atrium balustrade edge detail, and has done some hand drawings to sort of explain how the structure, the planter beds, the false flooring all sort of work together. Gone through the same sort of 3-dimensional drawing exercise to understand how things go together, and then provide the same kind of staged sort of axonometric assembly drawing to sort of explain the end results and sort of to talk a bit about the integration of services into the design. Yeah, and then I think just to sort of link this to the broader sort of way the subject works, this is the sort of the final third year technology subject, and it's immediately before well, personally, I encourage students to go out and do at least a year of work before sort of returning to their masters, to sort of get that sort of understanding of what life in practice is like, and to sort of to just build up their knowledge of the construction industry, of standard details, of work practices, how CAD works, architectural language, all of those kinds of things. And so a big part of this subject is also collaborative documentation. So students generally work in groups of 4 or 5 to do I suppose a DD set for a reasonably complex building. So what we're sort of seeing here is part of the first assignment, where students take an existing building volume that we provide and then overlay it with an exemplar sort of facade system that comes from an architect that we sort of give them to copy. And then the final assignment sort of ties this element with the sort of detail resolution, and students combine to work on a large package that sort of documents plans, sections, elevations, and details of this proposed new school of architecture on a site in Ann Street in Brisbane's CBD. So one thing that really struck me from your presentation, Penny, was just the focus on smaller scale, higher quality work, and it'll be interesting to sort of see, like, there's from hearing conversations with students over a number of years around technology, I can see that this is it's a very large and complex assignment. And it does, like, after seeing your presentation, it does make me wonder if this is potentially sort of pushing too hard at too many things at once in order to sort of, get the experience of the complexities of working in teams and of managing CAD software and of managing complex details all at the same time. Certainly, I think the experience is valuable, and the excellent students who thrive no matter sort of what kind of thing you put them through get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
But it does make me wonder whether, people are struggling just to complete the work without really having time to reflect on what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get around it a little bit by having a group project. So that is definitely one way to deal with it. But yeah, I just cringe at when I first started teaching, what I used to get students to do. Just so much work. It was so much work compared to what I do now. I get tutors in now who I taught when I first started, who are just going, well, they do what? That's a fraction of what we had to do. And I said, yeah, but you know what? These guys produce better work.
Yeah.
It's better, and they've got a better understanding. But I mean, I don't think that means you can't do big things, but maybe the group, they hone in on smaller aspects, which is kind of what you did. So I think
I think targeting is the way to sort of manage that. And one thing that throughout the course, there's always difficulties around group work where some, it's just difficult to form groups that work together. I think what Chris has done well in this subject is set up a bunch of sort of scaffolding around making agreements with your groups, deciding how you're going to work, how you're going to communicate. If you have to tell someone something's done something wrong or they're late, how are you going to communicate what the consequences are of not sort of delivering on the things that were agreed.
And so I think that's really important as part of construction, because that's what we do in our construction teams. And we have to be able to deal with people. And I think often we put students in groups, but we never actually explicitly tell them how to be a good group member. So I think that's a really good thing to do.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think that sort of echoes, well, yeah, it's certainly how I feel as well. It's similarly, while tutoring in Tim's second year subject, there was a similar thing where there was a requirement for students to produce drawings in CAD, and we sort of provided resources like LinkedIn Learning and Archistar for students to sort of learn it, but without a sort of structured approach to teaching how it all sort of goes together. Students really sort of struggle, and it's kind of like you really do need to sort of do some hand holding, especially the first time people engage with complex CAD programs, to sort of make sure that they understand why they're doing it in some way. This isn't just an arbitrary series of hoops they've got to jump through. Like, we're not making you watch 10 hours of LinkedIn Learning because we're sadists and we know it's boring and you'll hate it. Like, it's actually important, and it's going to teach you some fundamental skills that'll be useful in your working life.
I find with LinkedIn Learning, though, that it's still up here too much, and it tries to teach everything. So with my tiny little videos, we start really small, and eventually we can work up in complexity because they're ready for it. And I mean, that was in the feedback today that I got for the unit I just ran. Overwhelmingly, that's what they said. Those Revit videos were just awesome. So, and that, like, they're so low key, and I make so many mistakes through the whole thing. But because it's project specific, it's not just some random building that someone's showing you how to do something, that it's they can follow it through.
I suppose another sort of like issue I'm interested in generally about teaching of technology, and I think the approach Tim previously spoke about, of sort of providing a design and then students do, like, just basically getting them out of designing something within technology. I think either providing some off-the-shelf plan to work with, or alternatively finding a project they've already done design on in a previous semester and sort of dragging that into technology. I had good experience of that as a student. I found it really sort of useful and worthwhile, because you're sort of attached to certain design outcomes, and it kind of forces you to deal with the consequences of your decisions in some ways. And so really, you know, it's very easy if you've got a plan that's off the shelf to just, you know, chop and change things without really considering what you're doing in too much detail. But if you've already stressed about the plan and the section and the relationships, and now you're thinking, okay, how do I make that all work? I think it's more challenging, but more rewarding, and it sort of actually gives you the feedback to your design process that sometimes I feel like technology subjects don't necessarily have. They can sort of be this off to the side. It's not design. We're not really focused on it. It's not that stressful. We can just sort of do some things and get through.
Super. Look, thanks for that, Paul. And I really, you know, it wasn't a conscious decision that there'd be such a good sort of, for want of a better word, reciprocity between Penny's and Paul's conversation. But I really think it's interesting, Penny, your approach, and it does sort of get a bit to what I was saying before, is that, you know, the integrations between, okay, so you want me to draw this wall, and I'm also going to show you how to do that in this thing. I'm not going to show you how to do it on your own one, but, you know, over here, it's a fairly elegant solution, and at the same time, the sort of scaling of it, you know, I'm, and probably Andrew, Tim, and Paul would attest to this, that, you know, the workloads at Andrew, that, you know, perhaps I was a monster in parts of the amount of work that getting people to do, but it's not necessarily the amount, and you know, it's very targeted, and I think that's a good lesson. Then something before Galnia starts, it occurred to me, you know, that a fairly informal conversation as a group could yield some really interesting sort of cross-fertilization and efficiencies in the way we teach and perspectives. And, you know, even at UQ, it killed me how the lack of coordination even between the technology teachers, and the benefit that you have, Penny, because you're teaching all three, so you're coordinating with yourself. So I think that's also a really key element of success, is just that pathway and a really clear journey. And if everyone's teaching their own thing, sort of mapping that is so critical. And something, frankly, talking candidly, you know, we're a, you know, friendly group here. I don't think we did well at UQ, and, you know, being a technology teacher at UQ, I also accept responsibility for that. So we have one more presentation, and then probably a little bit of time to sort of chat. The sort of format of short, sharp presentations and a big chat fest at the end probably didn't quite work, but let's hear what Galna's got. Let's also any sort of insights and things that you've got, to pop them in the chat, because, you know, I'd like to sort of go away from this conversation and thinking, well, what could we do next? You know, without overreaching on it, but let's just give it some thought. So over to you. Gal, sorry, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I'm
okay.
here. I'm here.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Penny. So I just start my job with Institute as officer in a CPD. But I also had extended practical experience in architecture and design around 10 years before I immigrated to Australia. And in Australia, I done my master's in urban design and PhD in architecture, and also coordinated a few studios and a technology unit for one semester. So I've been listening to all this presentation, and I can relate to all viewpoints, and as a practitioner, as an academic, and I also have a new perspectives on teaching design, and especially technology, from a learning designer perspectives. So I actually prepare my presentation on using technology in teaching technology. But I think that Penny and Paul already covered a lot of these aspects, especially Penny. So I will probably skip the opening of my presentation, just skip through these slides, and I will address what is my view of institute role in helping to overcome or to fill gaps in the gaps that you identified between our graduates and requirements of a practicing office. So just a second, I will share my screen. Can you see it? Yeah. So I will skip all this introduction because I'm agree with Penny that contemporary education does require a review of teaching and learning approaches, and especially the purposeful and meaningful use of technology in teaching technology. Sorry, I will do a presentation. So why do we need to do this? And as you know, there are two major drives behind review of contemporary education. It's a raising agenda for education and also change in nature of our learners who have different preferences for delivery method, different preferences for learning activities, and it's become more and more challenging to deliver authentic learning activity using technology and using our traditional approaches. So to illustrate some problem in teaching technology and other design subject from a learning designer's perspective, I will use a Tpx framework. This approach considers three areas of knowledge. It's a content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and a technological knowledge. And so content knowledge, it's what educators know, and pedagogical knowledge, it's how they teach, and the TK knowledge, it's how technology used in teaching. So we do have some issue with pedagogical knowledge, because quite often lecturer and tutors came from industry, and they have a wealth of knowledge, practical knowledge, but sometimes they do underestimate the value of educational knowledge and understanding that innovative way of teaching. And definitely not all academics are aware of different technologies that are available and different scenarios that can be used in a teaching technology. So from my perspective, the main problematic area in design teaching lying in between technological and pedagogical knowledge, and technological content and knowledge content. So this is just a brief overview. And we know that application of emerging technology in education provides opportunities to innovate the pedagogical approach and learning experiences. However, technology should not replace a good teacher, because behind any good course, you know, it's initially a knowledgeable and experienced teacher. However, do we need to use technology? Yes. To meet contemporary learning needs and contemporary preferences for learning based on a new nature of our learners, it's important to investigate how different type of VR and augmented reality and mixed reality can be used in teaching technology. And last year, I done a couple of quite successful projects in teaching technology using VR. Unfortunately, not for Australian university, for overseas university. But we just tested it last semester, and general feedback was positive. So now, how can I will stop sharing. Stop sharing. So, what is the role of institute in filling the gap in education? From my perspectives, or from my viewpoint, institute can explore and compare training needs and gaps from practitioner viewpoints, from academic and from students or emerging designers or emerging architects viewpoints. So probably I will start with a survey to identify these needs. And also it's also important to understand emerging architects' preferences for learning. Right now in the institute, we have two types of CPD, which is formal and informal. And I think it should be a more strategic approach. We need to map different opportunities. Probably some of these opportunities in between formal and informal, and consider a different way of delivery these courses. Some courses can be, some materials or training can be delivered online. Some can be mixed delivery, and even using some interactive lessons online, sorry, and definitely we cannot replace completely face-to-face training. Some ideas that come to me during the previous conversation, and for example, you mentioned that students learn from good examples. And so how can we present this a good example of professional drawings? And just currently we went through a world of project. And I thought, what if we will be able to organize an exhibition and show not just a final product of all this award-winning design of a building. It will be quite useful if we will show the stages of project development, including some examples of drawings, probably structural drawings that were considered or included. And it could be beneficial for members of the institute, because they can earn some points, but it will be extraordinarily beneficial for students, for architectural students. And it also will promote benefits of membership for student and emerging architects. And definitely, as I already said, we need to understand how we can merge these gaps from and gap identified from practitioner perspectives and from emerging designers and student perspectives. So this is my just fast thoughts. Yeah.
It's interesting because it sort of leaves us with something to ponder. Now we are into the borrowed time category of the meeting, and I'm really interested just to take a sort of a snapshot of opinions or ideas from others in the group. So I'm keen, from the Andrews. I think Sarah's been making a few comments in the chat, which would be interesting. Whether Anna is still there and she's got something, and Rhiannon, if you're there to make some observations.
Yeah, what do you think? What the institute can do?
Or even just general reflections of the conversation. Andrew Costa, I know you want to say something. I can see you're looking pensively there.
Still pondering. So yeah, regarding the subject, it's interesting to see kind of the difference between UQ and QUT with Penny and Paul, but also Tim. I think from going through UQ, I think probably what Tim was doing relates a bit more with Penny on how it can build up to it. And then Paul's was kind of the final subject before you come out to the industry. So I did find it very useful when I did that subject back when Chris was doing it a fair few years back now. But yeah, it is actually interesting seeing how the different universities have different approaches and actually kind of how there can be a bit of give and take between the two. And yeah, and actually be interesting because I'll be tutoring at UQ this semester too. But no, it was very interesting actually seeing all the different approaches and actually kind of the thought process behind it as well. Because I've never actually seen that side of it. So thank you very much for that. And regarding the potential kind of having these larger projects for the exhibition, talking about the CBDs, it is an interesting idea. I know some firms might be kind of against giving some of their IP up. So the A&L building, obviously the fact that UQ can use that is because they were the client. So potentially it could be a partnership with, say, the university, who's probably a bit more willing to pass that on. It is an approach for doing that. But yeah, I know a fair few firms won't kind of want to disclose some of the documentation, since they've done all the labor to get it done. So I'll leave it at
that. Andrew Wilson, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Did you want to add anything to the conversation at all? It's okay if you don't. Just thought.
Oh, look, the only thing I would add, I think sometimes we do things very well at the university, and then sometimes through kind of course changes and lack of understanding at a higher level, some connections get messed up. So I think it's quite good that next year Tim O'Rourke's the course that Tim set up looking at construction will run in parallel with a design studio that will focus on construction at that scale. So I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I think technology, is very important, but gets overlooked quite often. There's a kind of privileging of design courses. So that's, but seeing the presentation today, I think there's a lot of good approaches being taken to the teaching of technology. And I guess in relation to what the Institute can do, that's an interesting question. I think the Institute seems to be very much focused on award processes. So I think that a lot of effort goes into that, and it would be good to find ways to open up more support for different streams of, well, certainly the technology stream that universities run in some way, but also rebuild some of the professional practice support, which seems to have fallen away a bit.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point, and I think, you know, the fact that we have someone in support at in the Institute now, sort of CPD and continued learning, is an opportunity for us to maybe probe that a little bit more. So it's a good observation, Andrew. To keep it moving, and I do think as well, your point about, you know, the focus on other aspects, like, you know, what can the sustainability committee sort of offer as a sort of a more productive outreach? What can the education committee offer a more productive outreach, and finding balance and you know, identifying projects, I think is important. So a little bit like the sort of graduation to registration thing that we're working on at the moment, you know, there are other ones out there. Sarah, you wanted to make a point?
I think, thank you all for talking. That was really great. It was really interesting to hear everyone's approach. I think that the suggestion that, sorry, is it Galna? Sorry, was proposing for, you know, if practices could put on an exhibition and share some of their of documentation, that would be really interesting, even if it were just to universities and just opening it up to students and whatnot, if they're concerned about IP. I guess my point in the chat was about practice as well, in terms of are they invited to come and look at the programs that are being developed to offer feedback and advice. I know that some people have an opinion that universities aren't doing enough and they're not teaching the right things, and it would be good to bridge that divide. And I wonder about whether people are invited, and maybe it needs to be put on display if they are, just to communicate that we are looking at how to, you know, provide you students who will become good architects.
It's a good point. There are, each university will have its own industry panels, but the selection of people on the panels is generally fairly opaque, and you really need to question some of the choices, in my opinion. It's not the opinion of the committee. And it'd be interesting to sort of understand how those decisions are made. And, you know, obviously there's things about alumni and so on, that getting them involved, but, you know, finding a way to open a line of conversation, I think, is important.
I wouldn't even be able to tell you who's on the industry panel at Griffith, but
that's how opaque it is.
Yeah, but I definitely reached, because I'm setting up this course from scratch, I reached out to a couple of practices on the Gold Coast that I have relationships with, and also to Ryan at Fulton Trotter, simply because I wanted some of that practice input into what are their expectations. And I would say, based on other, like, Penny's obviously got years worth of resources built up, and I'm sitting here in week one going, oh my God, I have so much work to do and so little time to be able to prepare that for students. And I don't have access to a lot of, like, our practice is very small scale. So having access to varied resources, like good quality documentation. So the couple of practices down on the coast have provided some documentation sets, and I've asked for them at town planning stage and then at their building application stage, so I can talk to students about how you show things differently at town planning and BA. but really being able to access resources. And it does come back to intellectual property and copyrights, even things like, I want to be able to give my students a proper survey and have them set up drawings based on a proper survey. I want to be able to give them real consultant drawings and say, this is your structural engineer drawings. Now you've got to show these things in your documentation the way we would in practice. And being able to, you know, a few projects that we have that I thought might be something that I could base things on. There's issues with getting consent from clients about using their design or their project, or getting consent from consultants to be able to do it. And I assume that's the same and much more detailed for big practices that are doing big projects. So accessing those sorts of resources to be able to share them with students and then show them how to incorporate that consultant information and different levels of information is really one thing that I'm struggling with from starting out at scratch point of view.
That's a good point.
Marisa, can I add something to that? I mean, it's taken 12 years to develop a lot of, well, probably 5 or 6 years to develop those resources, and then I roll them out every year. But and I had to do it because there just wasn't any resources. But I remember when I first started, I was writing, you know, a lecture a week, and I was just keeping up. So I think being able to access those resources is great, but then because most of what I teach is the early years, so I don't tend to do the upper years because I seem to be quite good at breaking it down and teaching the basics to the younger years. And when you show them examples from practice, they're so complex that the students just have no way of actually getting into them. So I've actually just had to produce my own. So, and I've changed my practices as well. I've had to change the way I document, because when you start to teach it explicitly, you have to answer the questions and instead of go, oh, actually, I don't know why we do that. So you have to have a logic behind it. So most of my stuff, I mean, it's taken years, are just things that I've documented specifically for students so that we had a clear message through all of the examples that they were getting. Obviously telling them that every company does it differently, but if we have this kind of clear message all the way through, at least they get a good grounding. So it gives them a stronger base to be able to look at someone else's way of doing it and understanding how they've done it. Because when they see lots of different ways, when they're first learning, they just go, I don't even know what I'm looking at. It's a really tricky thing with, especially resources for practice.
Tim, you used to get some great drawings from, you know, the old guard that were sort of hand drawn, that were of a scale that you could, you know, deconstruct. But am I dreaming this? But did you ever do an exercise where you went through about how to read the drawings and to sort of understand the elements of the drawings? Or am I dreaming that?
We tend to do that in the tutorials with the tutors. We did do that. We went and that was the advantage of having that site visit, because we would get the drawings from the architects. They'd give it to us, often with sort of just saying, you know, don't share these, or sometimes no strings attached. And then the tutors would go through looking at those drawings with the students, and ideally would get them beforehand, and then they'd go to site. But this is what the Institute can do, because as I said, organising those site visits was a week of my work and emails and if there's people who have projects on that, you know, we can, and it's a hassle for them. They've got to ring the client or the builder, and there's permissions. And I've often thought it'd be much easier just to go straight to, you know, Hutchies or Lend Lease and get their projects and go through them. But when it really works is we get invited into the architects. They give us a presentation in their sort of the project. They talk through it from design phase through to construction, and then we go on site and we see it. And for second year architects to see that, and to see, you know, in second year that there is a connection between what they draw and what gets built. I think we don't have enough of that because we're so cramped at universities. But I mean, it was the only time they actually got on site and saw something being constructed. I mean, they do site visits of finished buildings, but we as Michael, we take them to G. James and that sort of thing. But So I think collectively getting the profession, if they're interested, and a lot of architects love doing that sort of thing, love taking a small group of students around on site and showing them through. It's invaluable. And we can program that in, but we don't have the staff to go out and take everyone out. So often, we did that, Michael, you'd farm it out to people, and they'd have the, they'd meet the students and take them around. I would try to go as many as possible, but I just didn't have the time.
So, Anna, are you still there? Like, I'm wondering, with the access to Gringotts underneath the AIA in Montague Road, is there any capacity for any level of financial support to some of these initiatives that can cross over institutions to produce resources and to do that legwork and so on? Because we do rely on the sort of goodwill of volunteers and so on, but at the same time, if there were small targeted support to a program that could be transformational, it would benefit all of the universities and ultimately the practice readiness of the students.
Absolutely. I mean, that's it needs to be something that's proposed at the planning day effectively and put forward as something that the members want to do, and then we budget for that. I think what I'm reflecting on, seeing, listening to everyone who's spoken so far and listening into the conversation is that I think, and also having taught across 4 universities and being a tutor of Penny's and a student of Paul's and all the rest of it, I think what I think I graduated not having done was the repetition. Actually, I think I graduated having jumped through the loops of each course, and I did each course one time, and I got away with it effectively. I got quite good grades actually, and must have submitted decent work, but I did it once, and then never again. And I think that might be part of the problem. So maybe something we could offer is for students to come back and redo and practice doing what they've been taught to do, because I'm not sure practices, that's what I'm hearing from practice, is that there's not room for students to come and test those skills. They need to come actually prepared, knowing those skills, and you don't get to that point without actually having done it more than once.
I guess there's a at the core of that, there's a fairly ambitious idea, but a different perspective is great coordination between each level of a technology course can revise and consolidate learning as we go through, which is, I think, the benefit of your course, Penny. And again, because you teach them all. And for some academics, that's hard, because you just get cemented into that position, and to have the energy and enthusiasm to continue that year on year is hard going. But if there's a sort of a bit more of an openness, that a culture of sharing, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that we would be asking you, Penny, to share, but I think moving forward, if there are opportunities to have better lines of communication, better opportunities to produce things together, surely there'd be an effectiveness in that, and Teresa then doesn't have to get stressed out about things, and at the same time, if we can gear it in a way that Tim doesn't have to spend a week bringing around officers to get site visits, that there might be some value, but it doesn't happen out of nothing. So, and so that's the challenge, is to sort of defining what it is and how much it'll cost and what's involved. But it's food for thought, and it is great. I think it's the first time I've managed to see a similar mode of teaching across different institutions, and the conversation between Penny, Timothy, Paul, and Ryan is brilliant, and we just need to do more of that. So, did anyone else want to add anything? Rhiannon, I know that you're passively listening in the background. Did you want to share anything, or you're okay?
I think the only thing I have to add is it was really interesting seeing the differences between the unis. But as a QUT student, I think the only notable thing that I would say is, as I didn't take any of those architecture courses with Penny, I didn't have the same access to the Revit sort of outline and yeah, just all the assistance that I think I would have achieved a little bit better in my communications if I had that kind of guidance. So I guess the accessibility is not always there within the uni, even if it is QT to other QT units, if that makes sense. But otherwise, yeah, great to hear from everyone.
It's good, and it is a bit philosophically challenging. And again, Penny, please don't take this the wrong way. But you know, when I did all of the sort of Rhino tutorials and stuff out of Juris and Grasshopper stuff, and I put it all out in the public domain so that it wasn't behind a password wall, and got a bit of a kicking for that. But my point back to them is that, you know, we're a public institution using public money. Why wouldn't we do that? So there's another aspect of the access to knowledge and accessibility of information, and if there's a way that we can broker all of that, I think would be benefit to everyone.
I was just going to add that there might be some opportunity with the relationship with SONA and the Institute, because I know that at least Imagine has organised site visits in the past, and that's something that they try to do fairly regularly. Whether SONA do the same thing, I don't know in detail, but if that relationship and those events were promoted through the university more, that could be beneficial, you know, especially saving time for Tim, searching out all of those projects and architects.
It's a good point, and I think there's two things there, that there's some vexed issues in that as well, in terms of equity of access and so on. But more importantly, what we are missing in this forum is a student voice, and you know, students and Imagine are invited to this, and you know, power to Ivan. He did email me prior to this and said unfortunately he couldn't make it for a bunch of reasons. But you know, if we do have these sort of cross-institutional conversations around specific discipline areas, I think it is important to really work the emerging and CERNA cohorts pretty hard to get their point of view. Cool. Okay, it's 6:55. We're at the end of our extra zone. I'm pretty keen to wrap it up there because I feel like crap. It's been a really good conversation. It's very generous. Tim, Galen, Paul, Penny, Teresa, and in his absence, Ryan, to share the work that you're doing. I think it's been surprisingly informative and in a way inspiring, even though we're talking about technology, which has always been talked about as probably one of the more drier aspects of educational learning. So look, I'll send the minutes out to everyone, and if there's any other reflections that you want to send to me, feel free, and let's see what we can try and do, and pick one thing that we might be able to do. So thanks everyone.
Michael.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank
Good
you
day.
all.
Okay. Cheers. See you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.